Hey everyone, my name is Marco with Board Game Revolution, and thank you for joining us on our interview series. I have an extremely special guest. You may have seen his Kickstarter and even backed it, and he is with Final Frontier Games with his brand new game called Merchant's Cove. I have with me the one, the only Carl Van Ostrand. How's it going, Carl?
I'm well, man. Thank you. Appreciate the time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the time. I know you're really busy, as we can see you're at a hotel right now. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for spending the time with us. So let's get
Yeah, you bet.
started. First off, who is Carl?
Ooh,
What got you into board gaming?
yeah, it's a deep question. Hope you're prepared for the answer. Yeah, man. I mean, when it goes back, like a lot of folks, like my family always played games, so I've been doing card games and the classics for a long time. Um, but it was post college that I got thrown into the world of like CCGs. This was when Magic was the heyday, right? Still king of the castle, obviously, but even more so back in the time. So my very first game design experience came in the form of a CCG. I just stumbled upon an opportunity in New York. Um, did some work on a CCG, had a ton of fun. That was my first experience going to conventions, seeing the whole industry, everyone having fun. Then I got into video game design for a while on Xbox. That was also a blast. And then probably like 6, 7 years ago, I got back into the world of cardboard, started doing game design again on this front.
So, what was your game when you were a child that you kind of went to when you were playing with your family?
Man, I mean, it was like a lot of the classic stuff. So we were doing things like Trivia Pursuit and Monopoly, of course, and like we also, when it was family time for games, we were playing a lot of card games. So we have one called Setback in our family that's a classic. It's a team game. It's pretty cutthroat, good strategy, good mix of luck. So we're a big Setback family. My grandparents played it. My mom plays it, and we got sucked into it too. So those were the old days.
So that's what really drove your passion for CCGs then, when you
Yeah,
were in
but
college, is it was a reminder of your childhood.
absolutely competitive card gaming, and Magic was right there staring me at the face. My brother collected baseball cards. He was the sports guy, so we're walking into the sports shop to get baseball cards, and I'm like, "Whoa, what's that?" And it was the beta set or the unlimited set of Magic the Gathering, and the rest is history. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
Right. Well, how does it actually make you feel to know that your cards, your old Magic cards, are worth more than the baseball cards are now?
You know what? I talk with my brother about this all the time. I still have my cards, so I regularly pull them out, and I'm like, "Hey, so this green Gemal that we're calling this jewel that we're calling a Mox, yeah, it's gonna beat your Daryl Strawberry out pretty good here."
Yeah, I mean, I was actually watching a documentary on the rise and fall of baseball cards, and
Yeah,
I was just so shocked because when you go to a comic shop or a board game shop, you always see that Magic section, and then looking at those
yeah,
prices, you're like, what?
yeah. What happened? Yeah, right. I know because I did comic books too, and those things followed baseball cards. None of them were worth anything right now. It's
Well, unless
insane.
unless you have like first edition or
Yeah,
rare ones. Like my
right.
roommate started collecting comics again, and like he got the was it Vampire Academy, and
Yeah.
like those are like $400 $500. I'm like,
Yep.
oh my god, that's nuts.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, it's cool to see some of those old comics still have some like nostalgia value for sure too. So I have them in a closet somewhere. I still pull them out. I have a 10-year-old kid, so we pull them out to read them still. It's still worth it.
Well, do you keep them in pristine packaging, and like do you have some of those that you have grading? You're like, don't ever touch.
Oh yeah, yeah. The old X-Men's are off limit. Yeah, the Spider-Mans are off limit. I'm like, here's some other stuff. Check it out first. See if you dig it. Yeah, yeah.
So from your CCG days, you then said you went into video games. So
Yeah.
what games did you work on and for which company?
No, it was indie games. So one of the coolest things, like I don't know if a lot of the viewers will know this, but like one of the coolest things about the Xbox 360 that other platforms didn't have was a completely open environment for indie developers to develop games on the Xbox 360. It was an open market. I worked with one programmer, and we were able to make like a Metrovania style platformer that did really well. We sold it for $1 a copy, and it was like a heyday of indie gaming on Xbox 360. So it was really just when the barrier was low enough for indie folks to put their hat in the ring, and we were harking back to Metroid and Zelda, and a lot of those games did really well on the platform. So that was a ton of fun. I'm not a programmer, so I was teamed up with a programmer, did some of the art. It was all pixel based. And yeah, I mean, just I couldn't get enough of that at the time. I probably spent 5-6 years just on that platform.
Right. I mean, it reminds me actually of what was it, Super Meatball? Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
they were an indie
Right.
one that did on that platform, which is basically like the original Mario crawler. Where
It
you're
is.
going through a puzzled map,
Yep.
and you're trying to save the female meatball.
Yeah.
And,
There was a ton of cool games like that came out around that time that were basically just iterations on classics, but they were awesome. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
did that for, you said, a few years, and now you got back into gaming. So what games brought you back into board games?
Yeah, so like then I kind of followed that very traditional path of like, whoa, what's this Carcassonne? What's this Catan, right? So all these sort of like transitional games, they were hitting the table either at work or through friends, that I hadn't hung out with a while. They're bringing them to the table, and I was like, whoa, this is cool. And like a lot of people, I'm sure can relate, you start to feel this resurgence of creativity coming through the industry, right? So starting there and then walking into the game shop that I hadn't been to in a decade and seeing the walls covered in all these new things that I could dig into. And then from there, it just snowballs. You meet other people that play, you go to game nights. I've met a couple awesome designers that I design games with. So I just couldn't get enough. It becomes an addiction for a lot of us, right?
Right.
The good addiction.
Right. And, I don't know if you follow the same path I did. Like, I was huge into video games, in my
Yeah.
teens, 20s. But, like, what I've noticed is, like, people our age or, in our late 20s or, 40s have
Yep.
really transitioned back to board gaming because of the social interaction. Was that
Totally.
one of the things
Yeah.
for you as well?
100%, man. I mean, absolutely, because you definitely can feel, and like I said, I have a 10-year-old kid, and even just observing how things have changed, this ability to go back, start a campaign, or do a couple hours of board gaming with the phones down, right? And not that I have anything against phones. I embrace technology, but to be able to sit with people, communicate, get competitive, have a couple drinks, and do it with full interaction without looking at our phones is an awesome break from the day to day. It's the best escape, right? We all work our asses off. We're all looking at our phones all day long for work or for entertainment. So to put that aside, absolutely a huge part of the reason why I try to dedicate at least one of the weekend days to just doing some cardboard fun.
Well, from your background, working in, indie video games, would you have expected this transition in yourself or in the industry?
Not really, right? I wouldn't have. You would have thought it was just sort of like technology all the way through, headphones, microphones, getting on chat or whatever, and just, embracing the digital world. I can't honestly, there is a part of me that I'm surprised, but also really happy that there's a unified interest in getting back to real human interaction. So I wouldn't have expected it, but thank God. No, I think it's awesome.
Right, because I mean, I think the next push in gaming was VR, and
Yeah,
that was to make you feel more immersed into a game. Yet from there, we all tend to have now transitioned back.
yeah, right.
Where it's now we want the tactile feel of it. The
Yeah,
social engagement, the whole essence of what board gaming is, which they were trying to, it felt like, emulate in a
yep,
virtual world.
absolutely. Yeah, it was like a wonderful resurgence, right? And I guess that's the ebb and flow of things. I guess, right? Yeah.
So from that, you were playing Carcassonne, Catan, and all those others. What made you go, okay, I think I'm ready for my next board game? Because you went from CCG
Yeah.
to Merchant's Cove, and that's a big jump. Before we actually get into it, I just
Yeah.
want to know what made that transition for you.
Yeah, I think it was, a couple of the folks I ran into, Doug and Larry, who I still hang out with, play games with, and design with all the time. They just got me back into that sort of competitive element and creative element. I always have to have a creative escape. I know a lot of designers are that way, where you have to scratch that itch. You have to be able to make something. You want to be able to improve and iterate on things. And like a lot of us, we always want to make games that we really want to play. That's usually where it comes from. So watching them do some of that encouraged me to do it again. I had some experience already in that realm. I've worked with artists before. I've done game design documents. I've designed cards, so I felt comfortable hopping back in, and it wasn't too much of a leap. And then a lot of things were happening at the same time that did lower the barrier to entry and make it possible for regular people to do it. And that includes Kickstarter. That includes sites like the Game Crafter, where you can prototype very quickly if you know how to use it. You can iterate and design faster, and then you can actually put your ideas out there to the world. So a lot of that encouraged me too. Seeing the open atmosphere to design and create was a big factor.
And what kind of games influenced your design into this new game?
So Merchant's Cove?
Yeah.
Man, so you can even sense a lot of this comes from my love of video games, right? I mean, at its core, the elevator pitch that I, started years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, was I think it would be really fun and cool to no longer play the hero or the villain, but to play that NPC character, right? Ironically, non-player character from the video game. That would be cool. They're the ones that have to deal with all the heroes and the villains and the people going through their shops. The old trope is that Link from Zelda would walk into a shop, pick up all the things on the floor, and smash them to find the gems inside. What a dick, right? That's not really that cool, man. So I just thought it'd be fun to sort of turn that on its head. At the same time, games like Vast were coming out, and I was watching design blogs, and I was definitely inspired and influenced by some of that. And also, video games are known a lot for their asymmetry. So those two things, I was like, hey, this is not only a really cool thematic idea, but it ties in so well with the idea of, hey, if I were an alchemist, I would not be running my shop the same way as a blacksmith, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that really kept me motivated was when I floated that idea to people and people watched me designing it, prototyping it, I could see the excitement in their eyes. Like, well, that's cool. And that's motivating for designers. So.
Well, that was actually my first selling point on this one when I first got it in my hands, because I was looking over the rules and the first rule book is like really small. You're like, wait, this is the game? Yeah. Where's everything else? And then you start seeing there's 4 other rule books on other characters. You're like, wait, how do I get that character? And then you start like, oh no, I'm actually starting as this, and it's actually a different take. Like you blended Vast and economic asymmetry and put them together, because if you think Vast, everybody's playing their own individual games. That's what they're doing,
right, with different conditions too, right? Very, very tricky.
And then you think economic games, they're all playing the same game, but they may have different abilities. But you merge those two worlds together in such a, I'm going to say, a unique and smooth pattern that it works so well. How did you get that?
Lots of work. I mean, it's 2 parts really, and I want to make sure I mention both. But the first part is it was a ton of work, and there's jokes in my development thread. Are you designing 1 game or 6, right? And I had set forth not just to design this game, but to also attack some of the challenges I had with asymmetric games, like the high learning curve and the sort of insatiable need to not just understand my own character, but have an intimate understanding of all the characters. And those were barriers to me, honestly, that I thought could potentially be solved. So I was also urged on by this challenge to solve for some of the problems I saw. But first answer to your question is a lot of work, a lot of prototypes, a lot of play testing, as it always should be. But the second answer is that I had a really good publisher who hired some really, really good developers, and they took it from something that was good to truly elegant. And I would not be talking here with you today if it weren't for Johnny Pack and Drake and the dudes at Final Frontier. The reason why I talked to Marty Poole back in the day, I basically had to admit to myself, this is an ambitious design. I know I can get it close to the finish line, but to make it good, to make it great, I need professional assistance. And Final Frontier couldn't have been a better option for me. They just embraced it from the get-go. They saw the vision through. They never pulled me back. And then Johnny Pack and Drake were just the ultimate in professional developers to make sure it was polished.
Right. Now, how hard was it to actually pitch your game? Because I can understand that there would be issues with publishers saying, hey, this is a new concept. I don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, I love that question, man, because yeah, absolutely. And as designers, we always sit around fearing, well, holy crap, am I ever going to either one, be able to self-publish this, or two, get it sold to a publisher? I mean, that's the fork in the road. You have to admit you're going to hit that fork at some point. So yeah, I was worried about that, and that's why I have to give props to Marty Poole, because he gave me the introduction to Final Frontier. And again, they're just solid dudes, and they're like, yeah, this is ambitious, but it's also, if we can pull it off, it should be relatively revolutionary. It should make a wave. And as I sit here today, I feel pretty confident that we accomplished that.
Right.
You know, thank them. So.
And it kind of felt like it fit in their wheelhouse, because if you've played their older games, you know, they're all about, you know, individual players, but with a main board and a main objective, you know, and you had From Rice Nobility, you know, Robin Hood, and then Johnny Pack's game, Coloma, you know, kind of worked on your basis of, you know, players playing separately but together. And then from there, it went to Merchant's Cove. And it was like a extended leap, but it still fit. And to find that was actually quite nice. And I think you guys did a great job together.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of it, I do feel lucky. Like, I think that there's an element of that. You're right. It fit their portfolio from a sort of mid-weight Euro kind of feel, right? And we had to add a little bit of weight to my game to get it to fit the portfolio. But you're right. There was also another sort of wow moment when we realized, wait, this could fit within the game world that Rise to Nobility and Cavern Tavern already sit in. And that was like a whoa moment on the phone one day where we were like, wow, the Cavern Tavern, that's perfect. That's our Innkeeper, right? So yeah, it was also a good game world overlap. And I'm big on theme and game world, so I was like stoked when we talked about it.
Right, and that's what this game just oozes with, is theme, and how each character fulfills its own theme, but within the world of the Cove.
Yeah.
So how'd you get that blend?
Man, I mean, again, it just, sometimes the pieces just fit. I mean, that's also something that Drake is really strong at. I think him and I are similar designers, where we are ultimately always looking for the thematic tie-in. And I think that's where the bar is these days. I think if you listen to the gamers, rightfully so, myself included, maybe yourself, I'm looking for that now. If there's not a good thematic tie-in, I'm not as interested. I want to see that. I want to be able to feel like I'm both playing a strong mechanism, but also somewhat escaping into a new world. And those two things are important to a game experience. So, the economic mechanisms that Johnny worked on, the thematic work that Drake and I did to tie it in, it just fit. It worked.
Because that was actually the next thing I was going to talk about. Was I could feel the essence of Johnny from the economic system, because it's your typical psychological indirect interaction.
Right.
You know, because while, yes, you are working separately on your own tableau, it's that market that brings everyone together.
Yep. That's definitely his strength. You're right. I see it too. And yeah, that's what I mean by sort of, I guess we're tooting our own horn a bit here, but yeah, it was sort of a dream team, because he brought that element of Euro weight, of that balance, that sort of passive interaction that a lot of people enjoy. And we also simultaneously work to, one, keep the learning curve down, keep that thematic tie-in. And then ultimately, the big one is we wanted to make sure that there was enough present game information on the table, literally on the shop table, so that I didn't need to know exactly how the alchemist worked if I'm playing the blacksmith. I just need to know what you've used for time and what you've produced in goods. That's all I need to know. I don't necessarily need to know every intimate mechanism. I'm not worried about you suddenly winning, because I can see what you're doing enough. So that was big. Like, that was, a lot of times I'd raise my hand and I'm like, don't lose sight of that. That's what we got to maintain. Right. So, and Johnny's influence is huge.
You guys did a wonderful job on that, because if you watched our live stream, you can see, you know, while I may know what everybody else can do and how they do it, the other two didn't, and they still just wiped the floor with me.
Yeah, I saw you had a little bit of a corruption problem, which we can talk about later.
Yes. Let's just say first time playing Cap and not understanding how important that island is up on top.
Yeah, it's cursed, man. That's what you gotta watch out.
But what I want to talk about is actually, you said there's 6 individual player mechanics. Now I
Yeah,
know of the 4. You know, you have your set collection and color matching. You have your dice manipulation. You have your nautical movement, and then you have your
yeah,
tile placement. What's the
right.
other 2?
So the other two are coming out. So one's real distinct. One is a known sort of hot, fun mechanism, which is a roll and write. So we have this oracle, fortune teller. We were tossing around ideas the whole time. We were doing the development. I had always loved, my thing with the oracle was I loved the idea and hadn't seen much done around making predictions about what may come true in the game, being able to sort of influence your odds on that front and then reap the rewards of a proper prediction, like a good fortune teller should be able to do. And as we talked about it with the team, it just seems so right for a roll and write mechanism, right? To be able to sort of design your predictions, do your little star mapping, just all sort of thematically tied in again. So that's one, is there's a roll and write for fans of roll and write that just came out really well. And I would say some of the stuff that Drake and Johnny added to it, even take it beyond like an average roll and write, it's actually a really fun roll and write where you kind of roll all these little sort of taboo things like a couple dice and a bone and a coin, and you roll them into a two-sided dish, and that's how you actually develop your roll and write lines. The other one is the Innkeeper, and we're actually still trying to figure out a little bit like what we want to name the mechanism, because what you're doing is you're actually preparing for some of the customers that are going to end up on the dock. So it's sort of like a preparation mechanism where you need to make the beds and get the drinks ready in the right way at the right time and make sure you have room at the tables. So it's a little bit of spatial reasoning. It's a little bit of preparation. So those don't fall into like core well-known mechanisms, but I think it'll still feel familiar to people.
That sounds really interesting. I can't wait to see how those come out. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie, I know this game's going to fun. It's just one of those things, like, if people give it a chance just to read your page, they'll get hooked, you know.
Yeah.
But what I do want to talk about is the fact that one of on my video, I had talked about your biggest highlight is the fact that the asymmetrical play is great. It doesn't really bring replayability. What brings the replayability is your Underworld cards of what you select at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those real quick and how those came into play and the different ones of them.
Right. So one of the things that came up a lot early on in my development process was, hey, it sounds like you're making some pretty cool mini games, and they kind of tie into the main game. But people started getting concerned with what they often get concerned with, which is the interaction. Is there enough interaction? Sort of a double-edged sword sometimes in design, right? So one of the things I was keen on as we entered development, and so was the rest of the team, was making sure that while we each enjoyed our own little mini game, that there were proper tie-ins to the main board, that there was some element of unifying factors on the main board. So you've got the clock as your input, you've got the goods and the customers as part of your output, but we wanted more center play. If this was a true market, if it was really felt like it was lively, there should be other things going on. So the two ideas that really felt the most appropriate was the idea of townsfolk, which you remember from your playthrough, being able to interact with all these bustling townfolk that actually live at Merchant's Cove and you can hire for your shop. So that became this sort of replayability. Every time you should be getting different townsfolk. That should offer some unique play. You can shuffle in different types of townfolk that are thematically different, maybe offer different abilities. So we knew there was a lot of replayability in the townsfolk deck. But the second one, to your point, was this idea of these rogues, these bad guys. I think this originated from the fact that we thought it would be cool if, when you were pulling from the bag, if occasionally you got something a little bit off the wall. It just wasn't one of the main 4 types. And it was something that was potentially nefarious. Because every town needs a little bit of an underworld, a little bit of corruption. We had the corruption mechanic already, so we wanted to tie those together. And then, at the end of the day, we're like, well, how do we determine what each of these sort of rogue characters do? And then we had the idea of a singular card that every time you played, you'd have a different type of rogue in the game, which would really change the idea of when you pulled that meatball from the bag. So again, to your point, you're exactly right. It was designed with the idea for replayability. And we have them sort of stacked up in a way that you can kind of determine, hey, this one would be really good for a starting group of people because it's not too influential. It's just enough to be a little bit of a trick. And then some of the later ones that you pull are knocking dudes off boats, adding a ton of corruption to the rogue tower. So yeah, you can kind of scale it as you see fit.
Right. And that's what I liked about this mechanic of the game, was because this was the only thing that actually effectively changed the game. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the changing
Yep.
townsfolks don't really change the game. It changes the interaction, that you're
Yep.
doing.
Right.
Playing different characters or merchants, again, doesn't change the game. It changes how you're playing your tableau.
Yeah. Your personal experience.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is the only thing that goes, okay, so you know how to play the base game, you know how to do the criminals. Let's throw a little
Yep.
wrench in there. Now we're going to
Right.
do like the zombies, or now we're going to do the Kraken, where you're knocking
Yep.
people off boats,
Yep.
or the thieves, where it's affecting the market.
Yep.
So it's something like that that is kind of like ingenious, because it seems so small, but it has a huge impact because it affects everyone.
Yeah. Right. And it's basically at least 20% of the customers that come around are of that ilk too, right? So you can't avoid it. It's going to change the game. You're right. That's what it's for. And no spoilers, but there'll be some stuff you'll see during the campaign that I think will also add some of that potential variation for replayability. But that said, you're right. I mean, I also want people to enjoy the experience of trying their 3 to 4 favorite shopkeepers for that kind of replayability. But you're right, that doesn't change the core game. It changes individual experiences.
Right.
Hopefully some replayability, though.
Right. I mean, when you look at it, like, why do people first off buy economic games? Is because they want to maximize and become the most efficient.
Right.
And that's why, like, you pick the mechanic or player that you like, and then that's the one you play until you've got it down.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
And then you
Yep.
have those, the like you said, over 20% of them that want where the game state changes.
Yeah, right.
And you've kind of made it so you're saying, hey, economic gamers, we have something for you.
Yep.
Hey, guys who like constant replayability and change, we have something for you as well. And I think it's a nice merge together right there.
Yeah. Thanks. And this comes with experience and from strong ideation sessions with a great group of people. It was one of the best sort of working relationships I've had, and it was open ideas, and no one was afraid to throw things around, and we were able to sort of say, yeah, that's going to work, that's not going to work, and yes, this offers the right balance and blend of experience. And yeah, I mean, a lot of this comes too from, of course, Final Frontier being a successful publishing company and doing this a bunch of times already. I think they know when to say, thanks for the input, guys, we're going this direction, and they're right, and they're right. It's the right decision. That comes with experience.
So for you, what is your favorite character or merchant to play?
Yeah, I've been asked that a couple of times leading up, and I'm going to keep giving the same answer. I love the Alchemist for a bunch of reasons. She's accessible. She offers a nice blend of skill and luck. I love the counterbalance between the black marbles being both good, that they're wild, but bad because you have to manage how many you get or you're in some trouble. So there's a really simple push-pull mechanism that I always enjoy, where it's like, don't get too greedy type stuff. And then, yeah, I feel like the marbles are a nice little piece of eye candy on the table, and they're fun to play with, and there's a little bit of unknown where they might go. So right now, if I had to pick, it's the Alchemist, but honestly, I could sit down and enjoy any of them. And I think people are going to be excited about the Oracle too. She's moving up my ranks quickly because it's just a very, very interesting roll and write and prediction mechanism there.
Well, I'm excited about that one because when you said, I was like, that sounds really interesting,
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to say, for me, just because I haven't won with it yet, it's gonna be the Captain.
Yeah,
Until I master it, I'm gonna have to
in.
play it, because
Good.
like my first game was with the Alchemist, and I was like, this is really fun, but it seems like a little bit more easier pace. Like you go, okay, you're looking for combinations, you add in those combinations, and then you just make sure you cleanse every so often, and you don't put too many black marbles in the same potion.
I agree with you, and I think that there's an element of this game where there's like definitely going to be favorites among people. I mean, the Chronomancer Time Traveler, that's lower on my list, but I know that some people are going to love it. The people that love full control, that love that sort of anxiety of making the perfect system and dealing with it, are going to love maximizing that tile movement game. Whereas for me, you're right, I like the Alchemist because it's kind of chill. Like, you got to know what you have to do. It's matching colors. There's a little bit of push-pull, but you're right. It's sort of a more approachable character. I
Right.
don't get as much anxiety playing, right?
Yeah, especially when you have to spin a spinner and go, God damn it. I have to put
Exactly.
three more into there. There's another corruption.
Yeah.
And then you got nothing else to do except go, hey guys, I know I'm winning right now, but I just lost 79
Right.
points at the end of the game.
Right. That was a very epic loss. Yeah.
So let's talk about the game in general and what was it for you that you found to be the hardest thing to overcome to get it
Yeah.
to the point where it's at?
Man, the prototyping for this game was obviously a bear. That was very challenging. But I think, if I'm being honest, and speaking to other designers out there and just sort of relating to them for a minute, the hardest part is always getting over the hump of getting your design to a publisher. It's very stressful to be putting so much work into something you love and not knowing. So ultimately, the most challenging part I think any designer, both new or experienced, will face is when you get to that fork in the road and you're like, well, okay, I either need to spend a year getting this out to the world, getting ready for a Kickstarter, or looking for the right publisher at the right time with the right inroad to have that discussion. So, if I'm being honest about the business side of it, that's the most challenging part. I don't think there's any doubt about it. For new designers trying to get that first game with a good publisher. In terms of the design process itself, this was just a massively ambitious design, and I knew it going into it. And I think you're going to hear that word thrown around a lot because it's true. I mean, it was like developing 6 games that somehow intertwined and still worked. So that was probably it from a design perspective.
So it is launch day right now,
Yeah.
and you guys, have stretch goals that are lined up for your launch. Tell us about a few of them and what we can look for moving forward.
Yeah, so the stretch goals, I guess if we're on launch day today, you'll see them. But yeah, I'll see maybe some of them. But yeah, lots of great component stuff, upgrades that we can work on. There's a ton of content. I think today or the day prior to the launch, we announced that there's going to be a secret stash of stuff that's added every day to a stash of goodies that basically will become a whole box of components and add-ons that you can put into the game. So that's going to be a big part of the unlocks. I think very much down the road, if this game is enjoyed by folks, one of the other cool things about it is that it's very modular, how I refer to it. You can design a fresh shopkeeper, and it should plug in to the inputs and the outputs. That's the beauty of the design. So I think if there's success, if you're talking future talk, we are very excited to sit back down and start working on some of the ideas we had for other types of shopkeepers. But for the campaign itself, tons of component upgrades, new content, new art. The secret stash will get loaded up. So all sorts of goodies. I mean, Final Frontier does such a good job on that front. They're always there for the backers. They're always adding new content. They're always going to give the most they can give.
Right. And actually, that's one thing I forgot to talk about earlier was the art from Miko.
Yeah.
This game has actually been a more pleasant transition and feel of the theme than I'm going to say other Final Frontier games. Because, that was my biggest problem with Robin Hood and Rise to Nobility. It felt too cartoonish.
Yeah.
But it seemed like it kind of got dialed down with Merchant's Cove and, the table presence and the colors and, then you have the art of the characters and Townsfolk just come all together very nice. How did you guys, with Miko, come up with this is how we want to portray the game?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously a pro, and I mean, you see his stuff everywhere, and for good reason. But what I love is he does have that flexibility to sort of inject a unique feel to whatever he does. And I sat down and read when I first started talking to Final Frontier. I sat down and read some of their short books that were based in their universe. And one of the things you immediately notice, and we talk about it a lot, is that it's a bit of a zany, sort of trope-filled take on the very well-known fantasy universe. And I think zany is probably one of the better words I can think of, but there's maybe a better word. And he was able to take his art And you'll see it. I mean, if you look at some of the Townsfolk and you look at some of the weird little details he puts into it, I mean, he's just got this crazy creative mind. He added all of these things that just fit the universe so well, or they're just a little kooky, a little off, but still feel very warm. And anyone who enjoys a good, robust fantasy setting, you'll feel right at home. So he meshes that zaniness of the universe with the warmth of a good old-fashioned fantasy world.
Right.
He's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think he portrayed your vision and Final Frontier's vision very well. You know,
Yeah.
Because seeing this game on the table, you guys can see it on the live stream, on the preview, and on their page. You know, it just looks amazing. You know, and the table presence on there, it's one of those that'll make people stop.
Yeah, I think so. It's both vibrant and warm at the same time. And yeah, I mean, when I first saw that box art, a couple months ago, I made it my wallpaper on my computer because I'm like, I gotta just keep looking for these Easter eggs. And what is that? Is that like Red Sonja in the corner having a beer? And it was like the details were just so cool. Yeah.
All right, so how long is this campaign gonna be running?
It's a 3-week campaign. Yeah.
All right, so 21 days.
Yep.
All right, so you have 21 days to back Merchant's Cove. Carl, thank you so much for joining me on this interview series.
You got it, man. Thank you, Marco. I mean, thanks for doing that playthrough. Thanks for talking with me.
Of course. So make sure to check out Carl's new game, Merchant's Cove. It is live on Kickstarter now. You can go to the Kickstarter page. We'll have the link below. You can also go onto Final Frontier's website, Facebook page, and it'll all direct you to the Kickstarter. Guys, my name is Marco. That was Carl. Check out Merchant's Cove. We'll see you next time.